Welcome back to the Beta Botanicals Ecosystem Garage. My name is Ben, and let's begin part 2. It's been 2 whole months since we set up these new bioactive enclosures behind me here. This one on my right holds a group of 5 Ranitomeya Fantastica true nominal, and this enclosure here to my left has a trio of Oophaga, pumilio, Bastimentos, gold dust. Today we're going to show how I put all of the plants into these bioactive enclosures, some of the cleanup crew that I added, and there will be some clips of these pumilio frogs that got shipped to me in the mail. Unfortunately, the heat pack that is supposed to keep them right at about 70 degrees malfunctioned, so they did arrive quite cold to me, and I was very scared because there's a couple $100 of frogs in this tank, and I was kind of terrified that they wouldn't pull through. And we'll talk a little bit about how I handled the situation. It's at no fault of the supplier who I got them from. They're amazing, and we do have one calling male in this ecosystem. When I set up these bioactive enclosures, I got almost every plant available to me, 1 or 2 of each from a bunch of different hobbyists and online retailers. I have up above in the top 18 by 18 by 36 some bromeliads from Glassbox Tropicals. I've got plants that I got from Monmouth Frogs, which we'll be unboxing throughout this video. I got some from East Coast Frogs as well. And so far, some things have died, some things are doing so-so at this 2-month mark of these ecosystems, and some of them are thriving. This box contains so many cool different varieties of plants, so many shades of greens and reds and pinks, and I told Monmouth Frogs when I was messaging him on Instagram that I was a beginner when it came to plant care and to send me beginner to medium friendly plants. I told him the 2 species of frogs that I planned on keeping and requested he send me plants that would fit their behaviors. Unlike my first vivarium that I set up, which has the Ranitomeya imitator Virideros, I went a little bit lighter on the planting of these 2 Exoterra vivariums because I wanted to allow the plants to fully grow in and establish themselves, and I'm running into the issue where my first setup is starting to overcrowd and the pruning is just kind of getting out of hand. But the downside to this is that because there's going to be less cover in the 2 vivarium setups, the frogs are going to be a little bit more shy, and I am really experiencing that with my Ranitomeya Fantastica true nominals. I have 5 of them in the enclosure right now, and at any one given time I only see 3 of them, and they are very shy, and the second I walk around the corner they do go and hide in the crevices or under the leaf. Growing up as a little kid, visiting my grandfather on the East Coast and visiting the aquariums and zoos near his house in Massachusetts, we would go check out the dart frog exhibits. So a lot of my fondest childhood memories are surrounded by dart frogs, as well as some of the frogs we'd go out and collect in the local ponds around where he lives. I think a lot of people in the dart frog community and bioactive enclosure niche in general are really stoked about the plants, the living plants that we keep inside of these bioactive enclosures, and I will never claim to be an expert on the plants that we keep in here. I'm going to add in a bunch of different species, and if some of them make it, great, I'll get more of those, but some of them are not going to make it because I don't have the right conditions for them. I'm going to keep stuff that matches my lifestyle and is easy to maintain. I got all of these plants from Monmouth Frogs, and I'll put a link to their Instagram account in the description below. This guy is a really experienced dart frog enthusiast and has a wonderful resource on his website on how to sterilize new plant cuttings, and he's got 3 methods listed on his website. The first one is that you can use a plant-safe soap such as Castile soap, rinsing thoroughly, and this will remove pests and potential pesticides. His second method is soaking the plants in 5 to 10% bleach for 10 to 15 minutes and then rinsing thoroughly in fresh water. The third method is to soak the plants in hydrogen peroxide for 10 minutes, which is better for more sensitive plants, and ultimately this is the method that I chose. I will say that one of the downsides of getting plants from local hobbyists is that most of the time those plants are cuttings and are not rooted specimens. That is one of the advantages of buying from an online retailer for plants, is you're going to be getting rooted specimens which are better adapted to start growing in your bioactive vivariums from the get-go. To account for the fact that all of these plants are cuttings, I just adjusted the settings on my Mist King system to mist more frequently so that the plants' small roots that they have for climbing along surfaces had better access to water for longer periods throughout the day. I also made sure to put all of the plant cuttings really rooted into a mixture of sphagnum moss, tree fern fiber, and coconut coir because that will help to maintain the humidity around the fresh cuts on the plant stems as well as on those little roots that they do have growing along their stems. To attach all of these plants to the manzanita wood and cork bark panels in my vivariums, I used some fishing line as well as toothpicks. If I could go back and redo the plantings in these setups, I would not use the fishing line and I would go with something like a black or brown cotton thread because that cotton thread is going to degrade over time and entirely disappear. Not to say that I can see the fishing line, but I think that using something more natural in the setups would just be something that would benefit the ecosystem and also wouldn't weigh on me over time, knowing that there's just a whole bunch of monofilament plastic fishing line with my frogs. Another thing that I've learned about a lot of these Marcgravias is that they do like to trail upwards towards the light, and in my original vivarium I put a lot of them up near the surface where I could see them, so this time I'm putting them at the bottom of either the wood or the cork panels with the hope that they will eventually start to climb vertically and I can trim them and they'll branch out and start to really encrust the cork panel with a lot of their really cool structured leaves. I have some Marcgravias in here that are all green, some of them with pink growing tips, as well as I think I have one kind in here that has a white vein margin. It might be like Marcgravia solanum. I'm not quite sure. Again, plants, not my biggest strong suit. If it's going to grow, I'm going to keep it and get more of it. And if it's not going to make it, then it wasn't the plant for me. This is one of the clumps of the Solanum sp Ecuador that I'm just kind of bracing against the cork panel with some slanted toothpicks into the cork bark and then kind of draping the top of this Solanum plant against those toothpicks with some sphagnum moss at the top so that there can be kind of a humid reservoir of water that will slowly drip down the plant throughout the day. Did you really think that I was going to have you sit through me putting 500 toothpicks into these cork panels and putting all these plants into the wall? I thought that that would be kind of insane. So we're going to cut to now when all of the plants are fully installed in this vivarium. I'm pretty happy with the initial layout. Obviously, we haven't put in the leaf litter and botanicals on the understory, so it kind of looks a little bit weird, and I am waiting for some more filter sponge to arrive in the mail, which is the drainage layer that I am using in both of these vivariums. This one is going to be housing the Oophaga, pumilio, Bastimentos gold dust, and so we're going to set that one up. I'm pretty happy with how this one came out, and I left a lot of extra space for me to eventually add some bromeliads into this ecosystem. I'm probably going to get those from Mike over at Glassbox Tropicals. I got some from him initially for my Ranitomeya imitator Veraderos, and I've been very happy with how they've been establishing in the larger ecosystem I have above this. My big focus on bioactive enclosures is around the botanicals that we keep on the forest understory. I don't really feel like a lot of hobbyists go into the scientific details behind the leaf litter that we have on the forest floor of our bioactive enclosures. They are a major component of creating a bioactive part of an enclosure because it allows there to be a substrate for the cleanup crew to consume. It helps to improve the microfauna for our frogs to snack on. It improves humidity retainment and creates a substrate on the floor of these ecosystems that separates the frogs from the soil substrates that we might be using this in these enclosures, which we don't want to constantly be getting onto our frogs because there's a lot of bacteria and such that could irritate their skin if there becomes too much contact with the soil. So the leaves create a really nice barrier between the substrate and the frogs. There's also a ton of different studies that look into dart frog habitats in Central and South America and looked at the cleanup crew and biodiversity of bugs in the substrate specifically, and found that the more diverse leaves, seed pods, bark that you find in an understory means there's going to be a bigger diversity in bugs that you will find in that ecosystem, which is great because in bioactive enclosures, we're trying to recreate the natural environment of these dart frogs as closely as possible. So a big part of this part 2 of this setup of the bioactive enclosures behind me is going to be putting the leaf litter into the substrate, as well as some barks and seed pods. I have a lot of cashew leaves, which is the cashew leaves, as well as cacao leaves and cow's ears leaves. And then during the video, I included a lot of monkey pods, Oricomaya nut pods, catappa bark, as well as Coriniana pods. The preparation of this leaf litter is exactly like I normally do for my Blackwater Biotope Botanical Method aquariums. We go with a 60-second rinse in tap water, a initial 5-minute boil to remove any residual sugars or dirt and dust that might have accumulated on those leaves. We dump it out, and then we go for a second boil. I will say one thing that I did change on this is I didn't do that second boil because I didn't need the leaves to become fully saturated with water, because we don't need them to sink in the water column to rest on the substrate. They're just going to go right in and create a barrier between the frogs and then that filter foam that we have as the drainage layer. An alternative preparation method to this is to bake the leaves in your oven at the lowest setting, and most ovens go to 170 degrees. I think overall the big point of this preparation method is we want to sanitize the leaves to prevent any hitchhikers that might be dormant or eggs that might be dormant on the leaves, that once they get rehydrated in the vivariums, they might hatch or can start to grow. I will say the benefit of following the aquarium botanical preparation method is that the leaves are already exposed to water and are hydrated, so that when you do add them into the vivarium, they immediately start contributing to the increased humidity in the system, which is really good for the establishing plants that we've just added, because they are cuttings and they don't have full robust root systems yet. In addition to the springtails that I just dumped into this ecosystem, I'm also going to add some dwarf white isopods into the enclosure that's going to have those Oophaga, Pumilio, Bastimentos, gold dust. The dwarf white isopods is something that I've never kept before. I didn't add them into the imitator Veridera enclosure up above, and since the Bastimentos are a larger frog, I felt pretty confident putting in a larger member of the cleanup crew into their leaf litter, and I do plan on diversifying the cleanup crew in a future video by adding in some orange or red springtails. This vivarium is going to be housing the Fantastica 2 Nominal, and this leaf that I'm adding in right now is our cow's ears leaf litter. You can find these as well as the cashew leaves going in the Bastimentos vivarium on betabotanicals.com. This is an Oricomaya nut pod, and I'm already working on episode 3 of this build series, but this Orico nut pod is actually holding on to water and has created a really nice location for the frogs to soak in. It's something that I haven't experienced when I've used these nut pods before, and is super cool. Alongside this pod, I've added in some Leucisthis piscinus, which is a monkey pod, some curled catappa bark, and then the big leaf that I just added in there is one of the cacao leaves. Here's the fun part. We're actually going to add in the dart frogs into their ecosystems. These are those Ranitomeya Fantastica True Nominal, which I got from a local hobbyist who lives very close to me in Washington State. I don't have any footage of his frog house. However, he doesn't just have a frog room. It's sort of spilling out into his living room, but he probably has over 20 different species of Ranitomeya frogs. I don't have any footage of his enclosure, but if you would like to see a future video on the channel of me doing an interview with him, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll see if I can work something out. He's been in the hobby for a very long time, took a couple years break, and is just getting back into it, and he's been really helpful for me for learning how to care for these frogs. Ranitomeya Fantastica true nominal are native to the Peruvian Amazon basin, and they are considered near threatened on the IUCN Red List. All of the frogs that I am keeping are diurnal, meaning that they are awake during the day, just like us. In the wild, these frogs do live near streams and bromeliads, and they do forage on smaller vertebrates, and they do acquire toxins for defense while they're in the wild. However, in captivity, they do not have access to those same food sources and lose their ability to produce those toxins. This is the part of the video where I will say viewer discretion is advised because we are about to see some very cold frogs. Unfortunately, the heat pack that was used in this box did not work correctly, and these frogs were incredibly cold. We did ship them hub to hub, so if we had done normal post, they would have been much colder and probably would not have made it. As soon as I unboxed them, I put them into the vivarium as soon as possible so that they could warm up. And within an hour, they had all righted themselves and were standing with their heads off of the leaf litter, with a couple of them actually hopping around. Here they are 2 weeks later. I think they like hanging out at the top of the bioactive enclosure because that is the warmest location in their habitat. Since I went with a little lighter planting of these two ecosystems, it has been a really big exercise in patience waiting for these plants to grow in, but every time I see a new leaf budding off of the main stem of a plant, I get really excited, and as the plants are growing in this Fantastica true nominal vivarium, the frogs are getting more and more bold. At the end of the video, I did catch a frog hanging out on the Costus catabaca something or other. Hold on, let me get the scientific name. Casdus tapinbacchiaris. Sharif did warn me that the true nominals were a shyer species of frog, but I said, nah, don't worry about it, it's gonna be okay. Sharif, you are correct. Cool plant, it's a Syngonium Rayii, and it has really cool, kind of like purpley sheer on the leaves to them and a really delicate root structure. This is the Microgramma linguiforme, and it's starting to send out these side shoots, which are really cool, and the leaf structure on them looks just like the Java ferns that I have in my biotope-inspired aquariums. I'm pretty sure that this is the Peperomia emarginella, and I really like the way that it's cascading and creeping along this piece of manzanita wood. The Oophaga Bastimentos gold dust are eating really well and getting nice and plump. I didn't get a video footage of the male calling with the recording, so I'll make sure to try and capture that and include it in episode 3. Holy cow, these frogs do eat a lot of fruit flies though. 2 weeks later, and all of the plants are growing in really well. All of them have established nice root structures. I went and changed my Misc system again. We now have a 60-second spraying at 8:30 a.m., a 5 to 10 second spraying at 3 p.m., and then again 60 seconds at 8:30 p.m. This is doing a really good job of soaking everything. The botanicals that we keep in our bioactive enclosures foster a really diverse community of bacteria and fungal populations, and those help to feed the microfauna in your enclosures. This is the cleanup crew, this is the springtails, dwarf white isopods, as well as some of the things that we can't see with the naked eye inside of these enclosures. And those are all super important for fostering a more robust ecosystem for our dart frogs, because our dart frogs are ultimately going to be snacking on some of those larger critters, and the only way that we can help improve their populations is by supplying them with the base of the food web, which is the leaf litter and botanicals on the substrate. Here's a section of catappa bark which has been sitting in this bioactive enclosure for the last 2 months, and as you can see, there's just a ton of these springtails crawling all over the surface of this bark. Thank you for your patience in the release of episode 2 of this bioactive build series. The holidays were really crazy. Beta Botanicals has been seeing record growth in the number of new ecosystem builders coming in, and I'm playing catch up. In the next episode, episode 3, I'll make sure to include an update on all the frogs, and thanks for sticking around for this whole 20-minute YouTube episode. If you enjoyed it, please make sure you are subscribed to the channel and hit the like button and share it with a new dart frog hobbyist.